Amen. Amen. So we're in a series, if you're just joining us for the first time, in a series talking about change, talking about transformation, how we can make change in our life and why it's difficult and all these sorts of things. And last week I gave a lot of scriptures and so forth about it, even the week before that. And so today I want to talk about, the title is called Kicking the Habit. Kicking the Habit. Have you ever tried to kick a habit? Anybody? Try to kick a habit? I think we all have at one time or another. I think that's a lot what, kind of New Year's is about, right? We have these New Year's resolutions. We're trying to kick some sort of habit, right? And any habit, really, and we find it difficult to do that. So I was looking online, so I have a couple pictures, just two pictures. Put the first one up there this is about smoking. It says, yes, I smoke, but only when my dad is around. Talking about secondhand smoke. Now these are advertisements to try to get people to kick the habit, get people to stop smoking. The bottom one said, when did I smoke my first cigarette? I don't know. You have to ask my dad. And so look at the next picture. I love this one. I had to bring this one. You like that? That'll get you to think about smoking, right? But I think we've all tried to kick some sort of habit. So today, actually, what I want to talk about today is this. That's why I have Brock come up and sing a song again. I want to talk about kick the habit of being yourself. And you think, being myself? Well, why would I want to kick the habit of being myself? Well, my point is that a lot of us have things in our life and have had things in our life for a long time. I think you can relate. That you thought maybe when I accept Christ and everything's going to change and miraculously somehow God's going to intervene in my life and just, like dominoes are all going to fall and all these things that I've, wanted to change in my life and couldn't, it's going to happen. And then you go to church and you're told, I'm not saying this is a bad thing, but you're told, well, you just need to pray. And so you pray hard and ask God to change you and you work hard at it for a while and you find yourself right back in the same situation. Now, when I say kick the habit of being yourself, I don't mean the good parts of you, right? I don't mean those things about your life. I mean the parts where you've struggled with in your life for a long time. As a matter of fact, you may not even know why it is you're like that. Like, why do I have this issue in my life? Where did maybe it's an anger issue. Like, where did this develop in my life? Why am I, and we'll talk more about this through the message, why am I seem to be so angry? Or why am I always sad or depressed? Why am I this way? And you can't even understand why you're feeling these things. You just feel like, think about this for a minute, it's been so long, you just kind of think to yourself, well, this is the way I've always been. I've always been this way. And so since you have been that way for so long, we have a tendency to try to explain it away. So we explain our behavior by our ethnicity or by something in our life, right? We just kind of try to explain it away. So today we're going to talk about kicking the habit of being yourself. And if this is important to you, if this is something that you've thought about, and I think this series about change, if you miss some of it, go back and watch some of those. And next week will be sort of the second part of this message, because I know I won't have enough time today. But let me just start by this. Let me ask you a few questions. How often do you think about the thoughts that you're having? Just think about that for a minute. How often do you actually think about the thoughts that you're having? In other words, do you ever pay attention to where those thoughts may have come from? Where they may have originated? Do you know what has maybe taken place in your life to make you think that way? Listen to this. A new study suggests that the average person, and I know you guys aren't average, you guys are well above average, but has 6,200 thoughts every day. 6,000, think about that for a minute, 6,200 thoughts every single day. If there's anything else in your life that is that frequent in your life, you'd pay very close attention to it, wouldn't you? Right? 6,200 thoughts. That means that you have 387.5 thoughts per waking hour. That's 6.4 thoughts per minute. Wow, we're doing an awful lot of thinking, aren't we? Now, anything that we're doing that much, I think we need to pay close attention to. So, here are a couple points. You want to write these in your notes. Two very important points that you want you to get right now as we progress in this message. And that's the first one's pretty simple. The thoughts are the product of your mind. That makes sense, right? Thoughts are the product of your mind. The second thing then is this, is that feelings are the product of your body. Now, I can get into a little bit more science about that maybe a little bit later, but talking about neuropeptides and how neuropeptides, they call it the molecule of emotion, and they leave our brain and they attach on receptor cells. And what we're finding now, what science is finding now, receptor cells are throughout your whole body. Have you ever used the expression, I just had a gut feeling? Have you ever used that? Just had a gut feeling. Well, it may not just be your gut, it's your body. Your body feels, and neuropeptides are this molecule that goes out through your body and attaches to these, this is important to remember, they attach to these receptor cells in your body, and these receptor cells get used to receiving these neuropeptides. Now, neuropeptide is a chemical. Write that down somewhere. Neuropeptide is a chemical. We're going to talk a little bit about that it's a chemical. So all this happens, all this that I'm talking about happens so you can feel the way that you're thinking. You could feel the way that you're thinking. So, if you're having loving thoughts, right? Then you want that feeling to correspond with that. So as you think, your brain goes to work. As you think a thought, your brain goes to work. It's this, we talked about before, it's this complex, this neural network in your brain. It lights up as you have one thought. And the brain fires then in a corresponding sequence and patterns and combinations that correspond with that thought. And then that produces a level of mind equal to that thought. It's really not that complicated, right? You have a thought, and there's a sequence of neurons that fire in your brain, a certain sequence, a certain pattern, a certain combination that correspond to that thought, and then you have a mind that's equal to that thought. Now, once all this is activated, your brain then produces specific chemicals. Right? We talked about that, how a neural network is an electrical chemical reaction in your brain. And so these specific chemicals, and that's important to remember, I told you before, remember that chemicals, write that down somewhere. It's the exact signature to the thought that you had, the chemical is. Now, once all that happens, right, you begin to feel the way that you're thinking. So if you think loving, joyful, joyous, grateful thoughts, what chemicals are you producing? You're producing chemicals that give you a feeling of love, of joy, of gratefulness. This isn't rocket science, right? We've had messages here before about gratefulness, about learning how to be grateful. And actually taking time to sit down and write down things that you're grateful for. Start your day. Let me just put a plug in that again for you right now. Start your day as soon as you wake up. Forget about all the problems you're going to have and all that sort of stuff, right? Think about what you're grateful for, because that's the chemicals that are going to be produced in your brain. They're going to be sent throughout your body, and your body's going to start to feel grateful. If you wake up in the morning and your first thoughts are your anxious thoughts, nervous thoughts, right, about the day, those chemicals are going to be produced, and those chemicals are going to be sent throughout your body. And your body then is going to start to feel that way. It's all pretty simple, right? so far? It all makes sense. Shake your head if you agree with me. It makes sense. This is the way it's happening. Our thoughts are these electrical chemical reactions in our brain, and the thought has a corresponding chemical that sends it through our body that creates the feeling that corresponds with the thought that you have just had. So, all that's true of good thoughts, all the same thing's true of negative thoughts, of fearful thoughts, of impatient thoughts. So if you feel a negative thought, if you feel a fearful thought, you'll begin to experience that sort of emotion in your body. That sort of, your whole body will start to respond to those negative thoughts. So you can see that there is this dance that goes on between your mind, your brain, and your body. Friends, we're not separate. It's all combined. It's all together. It's all integrated. Now this isn't in my notes, but let me just throw this in there because we're going to be talking about this next week. You think that your physical symptoms are just a symptom of your environment? Unfortunately, most of them are not symptoms of our environment. Some are. A lot of the symptoms that we feel in our body are products of our mind. You ever heard the term mind over matter? It actually is real. It actually exists. Because our brain is producing these chemicals. These chemicals are distributed out throughout our whole body, and they're affecting every cell in our body. Every single cell. So, your brain is in constant communication with your body. We begin to feel the way that we're thinking. Then we begin to, now this is the interesting part. So we have a thought, and that thought produces these chemicals go in our body that give us a feeling. Now we have the feeling. Now, since they're in constant communication and your brain is constantly monitoring your body, your body then sends a signal to your brain about how it's feeling, and you begin to, guess what? Have thoughts that correspond with how you're feeling. You ever see a hamster on a wheel? Right? Just going round and round and round. It's the same thing. When you have a thought, it produces a chemical. The chemical is distributed through your body. You have a feeling. That feeling sends a signal back to your brain about how it's feeling, and you have a corresponding thought. And our brains, again, remember this, our brains are constantly monitoring the way the body is feeling. And based on the chemical feedback that your brain receives, it generates even more thoughts that correspond with the feeling. So, first we begin to feel the way we were thinking. You can put this in your notes. First, we begin to feel the way we were thinking, but then we begin to think the way that we were feeling. This is called the mind-body loop. But you know another term that you'll be familiar with? This is called your state of being. Your state of being. Now, here's the thing about our state of being, okay? Our state of being, you could experience something in your life. You could be, driving to work or something and get angry, and that angry thought, someone does something, sends chemicals to your body, and you begin to have this loop take place. Now, it can be a momentary thing, right? And so your state of being while you're driving your car might be of anger. Anybody can relate to that? I'm the only one. Michelle, come on, I know you can. Right? And so we have a state of being. Now, does that make sense? Okay, that's our state of being. But the longer we have those same thoughts, right? Not just about driving, but just angry thoughts. And those angry thoughts produce those chemicals. We have that angry feeling. That angry feeling sends back up to our brain more angry thoughts, and those even get intensified. This state of being then becomes a habitual state of being. Or we call it a what? A habit. A habit. So I know you've heard things before about how you can take something that you want to make a habit, and you're said to do it for, I don't know, all different sorts of things. 21 days. How many heard 21 days? Or whatever it is, right? You do it for this length of time, and that becomes a habit, right? Well, first it becomes a state of being for you. And after you've done it for a long time, now that becomes a habit. And what happens is, friends, is this, is that, have you ever heard this term before? Muscle memory. You heard that before? You ever try to think of a phone number? This is back before speed dial and all that kind of stuff. And right, think of a phone number. You can't pull it up in your conscious mind. But you pick up the phone and you dial it. I've had that before with combination locks. What's your combination? Tell somebody to get in. I don't know. I can't think of it. I walk up to the combination lock and I automatically do it. That's because our body now has been trained so well that can actually do it. It's our subconscious, right? It's buried in our subconscious, and we do it. Now, that's great as long as it's helping us. Isn't that true? That's great as long as the thoughts that we've had that gave us a feeling, an emotional feeling, that's great as long as it lines up with what is true. What's what is true about you? What's what is true about what God says about you? The trouble is, those same things that God designed our brain to work that way to help us will also be a detriment to us. Can you see that? That if you begin to have negative thoughts, that it produces that in your body in this continuous loop that we call a state of being. So we've said that thoughts are primarily related to the mind and feelings to the body. As the feeling of the body begins to align with those thoughts in the mind, your mind and body are now working together as one. That's important. Our brains and our bodies, our minds and our bodies are working together as one. And we said this is called our state of being, the mind and body working together. You got that? It's not in your notes. Write it down for yourself so you can remember that. Your state of being is when your mind and your body are working together. Your day-to-day life. State of being. This means what happens is when your body and your mind are working together like that, this means that we have become familiar with our mental, emotional state. Our mental, emotional state. You've become familiar with that. Now, this is what we might be able to call our identity. Our identity. We have this mental, emotional state. At least it's part of what we call our identity. Remember a few weeks back, I talked about Winnie the Pooh. I talked about Eeyore. Somebody go, oh, that's just the way I am. I'm an Eeyore. Or Eeyore's right. Everything is bad. Nothing's good. And then Tigger's just bouncing around from one thing to another, right? And so you have people that are Eeyores. You have people that are Tiggers. And what do they say? Well, that's just who I am. Isn't that right? That's just who I am. What are they saying? That's my identity. That's my identity. But we never stop to think about, where does our identity come from? How do we get an identity? So you weren't an Eeyore when you were 2, right? Or when you were 6, you weren't an Eeyore. They say our brains are fully formed by the time we're 35. That's why after 35, what I'm talking about is very, very, it's not impossible, but it's very difficult after 35. Because our brains have been so formed, so conditioned, neural networks so well worn that it's hard to do the pruning of those old ways and the sprouting of new ways after. It's not impossible, friends. With work and with the help of the Spirit, we can change. We can be a little more like mercy, like Brock sang, a little more like grace, a little more like Jesus, a little less like me. You know, we did a podcast recently, and we were talking about, the first podcast was about the cross and the meaning of the cross, and it seems so central to Christianity and everything. And I said, that's great. I love talking about it, and we had a great conversation. You should listen to it on our podcast about your father's faith. And but I said to him, I said, you know, what I think might be even a more compelling talk would be, why did Jesus live? Why did he live? And I think that, you know, part of it was Jesus came to show us, to show you and I, right? All through the Old Testament, people were wondering, they're asking, what is this God like? Everybody had these gods that they worshiped. Some worshiped sun gods and moon gods, and the Israelites worshiped what they called the one true God, but they always wondered, what is this God like? And they would write stories about him, and they would try to discover what he's like, and they really never knew what God was like. And proof of that is when Jesus comes along and he says that he came from the Father, guess what they ask him? Finally, can you tell us, what is the Father like? What is he like? And guess what Jesus said? Jesus told him, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. He came to show us what the Father's like. And then he demonstrated that in a human life to show us what it means to be truly human. And so when Brock sang that song, a little more like Jesus, right? We wear those bracelets. What would Jesus do? We like all that stuff, but really, we don't really think about how that's going to happen in our life, because we think of our identity. Oh, that's just who I am. I've always been that way. You know, I'm Italian. You know the way Italians are. No, it's not right. And so we need to discover how it is that we became this person that we are. Maybe you say, see, you get this memorized state of being. You know exactly what I'm talking about, don't you? Right? In your heart of hearts, you know what I'm talking about. You have a memorized state of being. Now you just say, I've always been this way. No, you memorized it. We can call these I am statements. I am. Or I have always been, right? I'm just lazy. I'm just lazy. Or I have a short temper. I've just always been a worrywart. That's just who I am. I've always been a procrastinator. I'm just like that. I'm always depressed. That's who I am. I don't think I have to go on, do I? You understand what I'm talking about? These declarative statements about ourselves, all they are a memorized, right? Remember, not just up here, mind and body are one, a memorized state of being. A memorized state of being. This is important. Talking about change. In your notes there, if you want to write this down, about what's going to inhibit us from really having change. Here's the first one. You ready? When feelings drive the way you're thinking. When feelings drive the way you're thinking, you will never change. If you allow your feelings to drive the way you're thinking. The second thing is this. It goes right along with it. You will never change if you cannot think greater than your feelings. If you can never think greater than your feelings. We need to learn how to do that, to cross the river of change, to think greater than the way we feel, to act, listen to me, all those things in Brock's song, we act greater than those memorized feelings and emotions that we have. Learn how to think greater than them and act greater than them. Do you follow me? This is this memorized state of being that I'm talking about. Okay, let me give you an example. Think about it like this. Let's say you're you're going about your day, and you're doing just fine, and you're driving somewhere, and all of a sudden you have a thought of a difficult, I'll say difficult, confrontational encounter with a neighbor, an employee, a fellow coworker, your boss, your spouse, a child, and this difficult thing happened, and you think about it again. The minute you think about it again, what happens? You begin to feel the same feelings that you had when you had the encounter, don't you? And you begin to think about it, and then what happens? Then you start to rehearse it in your mind, that thought. And here's what you're doing. When you're rehearsing it, you're solidifying that neural pathway in your brain. And you think about it, and you think about it. Now all of a sudden you start to replay it in your mind, and you start to think about all the things that you should have said. No one's done this, have you? So I think about all the things you could have said. I should have said this, and I should have said that. Man, I really would have got them. You get yourself so worked up, you're driving in your car, you find yourself starting to sweat. Wow. And then you get all anxious about it. What are you doing? So that thought that you had, right, from one thought, produced the same chemical that when this actually took place. Here's the thing. Your body doesn't know the difference between the event when it happened and when you thought about it. Your body knows no difference whatsoever. Because where's it getting its information? From the chemicals that your brain is sending to your body. And your body starts to feel, you wonder why. Wow, you're starting to get all worked up. You start to feel your face getting flushed. You start to get angry all over again. You get a knot in your stomach. And you start to think about, I'm going to write a letter, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to you play out all these scenarios. You get yourself so worked up over it. And then you get out of your car and you come into a encounter with somebody else and you blow up at them. Because why? Because now your state of being is what? Is anger. That's your state of being. Now, that can pass. But the more that you rehearse those types of things, the more that this state of being then, of your mind, body, right, become a habit. And so that's why we say, I've always been this way. I've always been an angry person. I don't want to be, but I am. You have trained yourself to be that way. Now here's the amazing thing. Listen to this. We have these receptor cells. At first we thought receptor cells, science thought receptor cells running in our brain. Neuropeptides, these molecules of motion attached to those receptor cells. Those receptor cells are all through our body, like I've already said. Now here's the thing. What did I say a thought is? It's a chemical reaction, isn't it? Right? So when your receptor cells receive that chemical in doses, just like any chemical, you start to take a drug, and after a while, it's not enough drug. You need more drug to do the exact same thing. It's the same thing with this. It's a chemical, friends. It's a chemical. And here's what happens. Listen to this. This is mind-blowing to me. Your body now, right, your receptor cells are so used to receiving this chemical, right, whatever that chemical might be, whether it's chemical of anger, whether it's a chemical sending anger feelings, whether it's sadness, no matter what it is, your body then gets used to it and your body memorizes it. Remember I told you before about the combination lock? How? Right? You have this muscle memory, right, that you can walk up to your combination lock and do without it bringing your conscious mind. It's the same thing with these emotions. And you wonder why. Well, why? I don't understand why I just feel this way. There's no reason for me to wake up this morning and feel this way. Nothing's happened today. I just feel this way. You know why? Because your body has memory. It has memory. And it's embedded now in your subconscious. And so you ask yourself, I don't understand. There's no reason for me to be feeling this way. I just don't get it. It's because we've conditioned ourselves for so long. And the state of being, our state of being has become a habit. And our personality then ends up reflecting that habit. And it's a terrible cycle that we go through. Our feelings now are controlling our thinking. Your body is now driving your mind. So your body has this memory. So it's producing these feelings now, with sending it back up to that loop, back up to the brain. And now you begin to do what? You begin to have those angry thoughts, those sad thoughts, those, right? You begin to have those. It's a cycle that affects your feeling, and then your feelings lead to similar thoughts that create this endless loop. What happens is then, if it's anger, then it builds, it compounds. Now, that anger ends up leading to a rage and aggression. Don't believe me? What do you think that road rage is all about? So it's all about this endless loop. It's this state of being of anger. Now it comes out in rage. Okay? Now, I think we've all been there before. I think we've all experienced this, right? And so in a matter of, it took me a while to develop that, right? All this happens in a matter of seconds. In a matter of seconds, our thoughts send these chemicals to us. And I think we've all been there. Now, imagine then if you confronted that person again, after you went through all that kind of stuff. Now you're starting to say things. Have you ever said something that you wish you hadn't said in your life, ever, to anybody? Yeah, we're going to say things that we wish we had never said. And then you begin to recall all sorts of, now we have to do this. Okay, this is the way this cycle goes. Now, we have to try to, because even our conscious mind is going to tell us, hey, this isn't right. So our conscious mind begins to think of all the reasons why this feeling and this thought is validated. Anybody? Well, they've never been a good person. They've always been like this. And I remember one time a year ago, right? And so our conscious mind comes into play. Now, so you're heated, you're emotional, you're sweating, and you've created this pattern in you. And this created these familiar thoughts and feelings, and these unconscious thoughts have become automatic ways in our life, and you're caught in these routines. You might call this the chemical you, the chemical you. We get in a place where memories of past events thought of so long and so often get easier and easier to recall, that they just become automatic, just like that combination. Think about it. You've been thinking the same thoughts for so long in your life, and they've been embedded in your subconscious mind. And so you have practiced thinking and feeling and thinking so long that they've just become absolutely automatic. And you can't seem to think or act in any other way. Now, this is an important point. Let me just wrap this up. For most people, we don't think about the fact that when you repeatedly think highly charged emotional thoughts, that we have an experience that corresponds with that. And the brain fires in the exact same way. And we just don't think about that. We just think it's, well, I'm just, or we know we're thinking about it, but we don't realize what it's doing to us when we rehearse these bad things. You're firing and you're wiring. You're firing and wiring. And you wire these brain circuits together, and that reinforces it, and it becomes a hardwired network in your body. Now, let me just kind of wrap this up with this, okay? Because let the band come back up right now. Get ready. My question is this then, to wrap this up. Does your mind control your body, or does your body control your mind? Now, you may be thinking to yourself, Jeff hasn't talked one thing about the Bible yet today. Not one scripture has he mentioned. I left it to the very last thing. Paul says, I'm going to read it from a bunch of different translations. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 9:27. Are you ready for this? Come on up stage. You're good. Paul says this, I strike a blow to my body and make it my slave. I discipline my body and keep it under control. I keep under my body and bring it into subjection. I buffet my body. That's not buffet my body, okay? I buffet my body and bring it into bondage. I buffet my body and lead it captive. I chastise my body and bring it into subjection. I chastise my body and bring it into servitude. I beat my body and make it my slave. Friends, what happens is this cycle goes on so long that our actual physical body is dictating to our mind how to think. And that's not the way it's meant to be. But we've conditioned ourselves for far too long that way. And we need to break that cycle. We need to break it. That's the pruning, right? And the sprouting is then the putting the correct thoughts in there. So next week, we're going to follow up with this. We're going to talk about how do we now do that? How do we break this cycle? Friends, you don't have to be that way. And if it doesn't correspond with what God says about you, then it's a lie. And you've been living a lie for far too long. Do you agree? We need to break that cycle. You know, I think just real quick, I've been on a new diet and everything. One thing I've been doing is, and the Bible talks a lot about this, and we're going to talk in 2 weeks about this, more about this. I've been fasting. I fasted for 3 days. Let me tell you why I fasted for 3 days. Because my body's been telling me, oh, you can't do, no, you need that, you didn't. I said, no. You're my slave. I'm not your slave. Right? And so for me, it's a very practical thing. Very practical. If I could start with something like this, if I could say, no, I can do this. I can tell my body, no, I'm not going to do this. Then I could start to deal with those emotional things that my body is telling me as well. So I start on a very practical level. The Bible talks all about fasting. We're going to talk about it. And it's also very, very good for you. But what I learned in this, my second 3-day fast, what I learned is this. Boy, my body has been in control for a long time. Long time. Far too long. Far too long. And I want to end it now. I want to help you to do the exact same thing. Your body's no longer in control. That your spirit can dictate to your mind can dictate to your body about the way that you'll live. Does that sound good? Next week. So let's listen to the words of this song. I love it because it is, I want to be, Jesus came to show us what it's like to be human. I want to be more like him. But it doesn't happen by osmosis. Doesn't happen, you pray all you want. I've been praying 60, well not 60 years, but I've been praying a long time. Haven't seen change. God doesn't unilaterally just step in. Maybe sometimes he does. Unilaterally step in and just change you. Been far too long, this automatic system in us. So let's listen to the song together. Let me move this stuff out of the way. Can you grab this?